Hey guys, so today I'm talking to my friend Shams. He was actually born and raised in Pakistan, and I'm just gonna ask him a couple questions, see how life was in Pakistan compared to America. So, Shams, what was it like being born and raised in Pakistan?
Honestly, it wasn't that bad. I grew up in like a middle class family, and growing up, it was pretty much like your average childhood, I guess, where went to kindergarten, had middle school, high school. That was pretty much it. Played sports on like the free time I had, stuff like that. Go out in the streets and like yeah, sports. Like obviously we didn't have football. We had like stuff like cricket, so it was different. But I would say a lot of the general stuff was pretty much the same.
I mean, was there anything at all that struck out different? Maybe the way people communicate with each other, or like family traditions, anything along those lines?
I mean, obviously, like it was a totally different culture. Yeah, like while growing up was generally the same, stuff like I guess just well, everyone over there is a Muslim. You barely meet Christians. I remember like to a certain point, like to me Christianity was just like something you read about in history books, and then it was just surprising to actually like see. So I think by the time I was like probably 14, I met like one of my first Christian friends, and it was kind of crazy because like a lot of classes we take are based on religion. Like yeah, you're in school, you have history, science, geography, all of that. But then I guess it's surprised and like, but then we also had like a class that consists of like Islamic studies. So it was just surprising to see how like I was kind of jealous of him because he didn't have to take those classes, and like during that time he would literally just like mess around and just not do things, and we'd have to study and we'd be tested on it. Um, so I guess stuff like that kind of like slowly made me realize how different the world outside ours was.
I mean, it's kind of a similar thing here, isn't it? Like how people in America aren't really exposed to people of like the Muslim culture, and it's usually not until a while that they first meet a person of that culture. It's kind of like a shock to them, and how different it is.
I mean, to some extent that's true, but I guess it's a lot more extreme there because at least when you're here, yeah, in high school you probably see like a few Muslim kids who like have like the scarf on and stuff like that. But over there, like considering like for the first 14 years of my life, the only religion that I'd seen was either someone who was a Muslim or Hindu. Um, I guess it was just surprising to see how like it was so different. But I think it was also like kind of cool to realize how like just because he had also grown up with like in the same country as I had, um, like a lot of his Christian values are very different from how Christians over here portray themselves.
All right. Well, speaking about different, when you first came over to America, was there anything that hopped out as like shocking to you, or like anything that's took you by surprise when you first came? Like anything like culture wise or value wise or socially?
Yeah. I mean, you had like honestly when I was back in Pakistan, I had like seen American movies and stuff like that, like Hollywood. I knew what it all was. And obviously like thanks to the internet, I just like pretty much man it had been like like I wasn't totally oblivious to what American culture was like. So it wasn't as shocking as I know some people have felt coming in here. Um, I mean, in the end, it definitely did feel like a totally new place, but at the same time, I feel like it was easier to adjust just because of how much, I guess, well, like at least how much, well, somewhat accurate a lot of the movies managed to portray American life. But yeah, I think that's why I wasn't really shocked when I first came here by like a lot of things. But then again, there were other things that I was just surprised how like, wow, the movies actually did get that right. What? So, cause you just see some things and they're like kind of hard to believe at like
Like what
the
things?
first sight. Nothing I can put my finger on right now. Yeah, I can't think of anything right now. It was like a while ago too. So now I'm pretty much just unfortunately used to it all.
I get you. Recently on the news, like, okay, well, not recently, but within the past couple of years, there's been recent news about like not stereotyping, but like Muslim prejudice and like people starting to turn against Muslims for all the radical terrorism acts that have been happening within the past few years. Has any of that like prejudice or stereotyping towards the Muslim community affected you
I
at
mean,
all?
honestly, I like to feel. Well, I prefer to be a lot more laid back than what like a lot of how other people feel. Because to me, I feel like if you're gonna okay, let's say you like I'm walking into a bus and someone like calls me a terrorist or someone's like makes fun of me for not being from America, I wouldn't really like give them a second thought because I feel like they don't deserve my time if you're gonna be that petty. Um, so I think that's like a kind of important mindset to have just generally, as opposed to just for people who are coming to a new country and feel like they would have some bias against them. Um, but in a nutshell, like there have been times, I guess, when sometimes I feel like um, I'm being discriminated against, but I just kind of have to realize that there's nothing that, well, even if there is something that I can do about it, it's honestly probably not worth the effort for me to try and change that person's mind, because if they're like small-minded enough to feel so strongly and judge someone based on like just like things they've seen or things they've heard, then I think that like they like me wouldn't like me saying something wouldn't change their mind about it.
You kind of think that like the idea that negative idea towards Muslim people is so like ingrained into them that there's no point trying to show them that you're really just a person, because it's probably not gonna change your viewpoint at all.
Yeah, and obviously there are times when like I do try to like go out of my way, and if it's someone who like at least is putting in some effort to like understand, as like they're like questioning things as opposed to just straight out like being abusive or insulting, then obviously I'm always willing to have like a good like a conversation about it and argue. But I guess it all depends on how the person's approaching the subject. Mm,
True that.
yeah.
All right. One more question. How about your family? How did they adjust to coming to America? Because I understand like the younger generation can have a little bit of an easier time easing in due to like you're still growing up, so you can still adapt to like new changes like socially or culturally. But for adults that are like so ingrained and like so not longevity, but like so lasting with their cultures, it
Yeah.
must have been a hard shock for like your mom and dad to come over here.
Yeah, well, honestly, I know assimilation for my mom at least was like a bit hard because she didn't like coming here because at least like, well, if me and my sister are studying, we're like socializing, meeting other people, and we have like something to keep us busy and just things to do. My mom was kind of like, at first she was pretty sick of it because she didn't really like enjoy the company of a lot of people here, and she didn't really know a lot of people here. I'd like to say slowly she's like getting more used to it, but I know a lot of times she still like wants to go back, just because that's where like obviously that's where all her friends are, and I can understand. I still have like some really good friends back home, but I think that like in the end, I personally realized that like coming here was a lot. Obviously, like has provided me like a lot more opportunities, but not just that, but it just a much safer environment to live in, because I mean when you're here you really don't think about it, but back at least like for me back home, there's like times when I honestly like so many days just like past 5 o'clock you can't leave your house because it's just too dangerous. So things like that you really take for granted, where like if I'm over here at like 3 a.m. I can just at least walk around campus and still feel safe and not like have to worry about getting jumped or shot. So that's like kind of putting a group perspective on it, but it's just one of those things you kind of think about.
I get you. All right, very last question, because I know I'm taking up a decent amount of your time, but so like I was saying earlier, like the recent news about how Americans would view Muslims in a different light than like an average person, you know what I mean? Like Americans would view Muslims in a negative light when they're really just people. How about Pakistanis or like the Muslim community with American people? How would you say the view is against Americans?
Mm, well, I mean, I obviously can't speak for like the whole culture or the,
Well, at least from
like,
your
yeah,
experience, and obviously you can't be the voice
Yeah,
of
well-
a billion people.
Well, my personal perspective, and like at least for like, okay, so it's important to realize like in Pakistan there's like a lot of different groups, and they all feel very differently about pretty much everything, which is why there's so much like fighting within the country itself, because you have many religions, you have many different just like yeah like religions are one thing, but then you have like people who grew up in different cultures arguing about different religion, then it just gets really complicated for no reason at all. But I think my perspective on this is basically that I feel that I understand how like it is kind of annoying to see how a lot of stereotypes are made against like where I come from and like my people, but I think it's like I think a double stand. It's basically like a double standard, because while like while all Americans think that all Muslims are terrorists, like I could say the same where like all Americans are stupid, dumb, and fat. But like, I mean obviously
Offense
that's
taken.
not obviously that's not like just to sum it up.
I get you. I'm just
But
messing
yeah,
with you,
so
dude.
like I think it's important to realize how like a society is made up of like a lot of different people, not just one idea that gets voiced and then the whole society gets shat on for that. So I think it's important to realize how like there's just different people out there, and even if a majority of them don't agree with you or like are against you, you just need to realize that like there are people out there who still feel differently.
I get what you mean. Well, thank you so much for your time, Shams. I
Yeah.
really appreciate this.